Well, in your book, you talk about following Christ should naturally lead to persecution. Now, in America, there seems to be a lot of people calling out persecution because of Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A and some legislation being passed and things like that. Is that really persecution? I mean, compared to the stuff that our brothers and sisters in China and around the world are going through, and what would you say to those Christians who seem to be almost calling something persecution, even though it's not really, like just government and legislation, things like that?
You know, I think I would say, no question. Well, first of all, I'm trying to obviously reflect what Paul talks about. I mean, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. And to be clear, that as followers of Christ, we never seek persecution. That there's a cost that will come to us as we pursue Christ. And we don't pursue that cost. We pursue Christ and knowing that there's a cost that comes. I do think persecution looks differently in different parts of the world. So there are pictures of certainly persecution that threatens people's lives, homes, families, children, in different parts of the world where I've been, some in parts of the world where I've not been. And so, I mean, that would probably be and people dying because they trust in Christ.
Right.
I was in one particular place where, recently, where, if somebody comes to Christ from this particular people group, I mean, their throat will be slit. I mean, it's just, and it's not by some governmental influence, it's by family community influence. And so that is, I can't think of a more severe level of persecution than that. But at the same time, even before getting like Hobby Lobby, that whole picture, I can think of some Muslim countries that I've been in and around the world where the persecution is more economic, where the persecution is, and I think this is part of what we see in the book of Revelation, for example, as Jesus is encouraging these churches to stand fast in the beginning in those letters to the churches. Part of it is, if you weren't a part of a trade guild, then you would not have economic opportunities for advancement. You wouldn't be able to support your family as well. And so, but these trade guilds were just idolatrous at the core. And so you had Christians who were joining trade guilds, and that was leading to idolatry, but they were thinking, oh, we got to provide for our family. And so even that, in the first century, was a economic form of persecution in a sense. And so I do think, so now to come back to even Hobby Lobby, and without getting into the specifics of that, I do think that there is a level at which that would be labeled persecution. Certainly it's different than having your throat slit for confessing Christ. At the same time, when you pursue Christ, when you stand on His Word, to realize that there will be cost in this world, that cost may be small, that cost may be friendships, that cost may be rejection, maybe economic, maybe social. They're different, and it could be your life. But at the same time, I wouldn't say to somebody who's struggling and losing something in this world because they become a follower of Christ, just because it's not as extreme as what might be in a circumstance like I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't say, well, you're not really being persecuted. I'd just say, all right, this is all relative as far as how extreme it is, but let's stay faithful in the midst of economic, political, kind of governmental things here maybe, and at the same time with our brothers and sisters, and let's spur one another on in parts of the world where it costs their lives to follow Christ, and let's spur one another on in whatever context we find ourselves. The other thing that I would mention is that we're careful not to so idolize safety as a god that we actually avoid persecution in different parts of the world, because there's no question if we go with zeal after the nations, after unreached people groups with the gospel, that we're going to face more persecution. And so let's not let that keep us from going after those